Hey everyone, Rarity Dash here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of Russian Dust, who has requested that I react to the Apu That I Know Brain Dump from Hotdiggedydemon. So, yeah, Apu. We're talking The Simpsons today, which is interesting. I don't think I've watched The Simpsons in over 20 years now. So, yeah. I mean, I used to. I used to watch it every week with my parents when I was small, back in the 90s. I liked it. And I remember Apu. I remember the show in general. It was pretty fun. I just haven't kept up with it, and I'm honestly a bit surprised it's still on the air. Because, I mean, it's been going a long time now. But, yeah, I guess I'm prepared for a Simpsons video. It's a 45-minute video, too, so I guess we have a lot to say about Apu. Okay. I don't know, this is a weird one. But it's Hotdiggedydemon, which is cool, I guess. I mean, I definitely know him from .mov. Yeah, which I do kind of have mixed feelings about still. I don't think it's quite for me. But I really like that one other video I saw from Hotdiggedydemon, that one Animal Crossing one. I mean, even though I don't play Animal Crossing, I just thought that was a cool video. So, yeah. And not really sure what this one's going to be like. I mean, I would doubt it would be animated if it's 45 minutes long. Because, like, that's a lot. That's a lot to animate. So, I don't know. This could be very different from what I'm used to from Hotdiggedydemon. Though, I guess let's get started and find out. And here we go.
The Problem with Apu is a 2017 made-for-TV documentary by comedian Hari Kondabolu, the subject of which being
a full
Apu, a secondary character
made-for-TV documentary about the problem with Apu.
Runs a store called the Quickie Mart and exists
is that the world we live in today?
That
something like that exists?
Mr. Kondabolu's assertion is that Apu is actually a harmful stereotype of the Indian
Of course.
Additionally, many online news outlets have echoed this opinion and published articles of a similar sentiment. And thus, something of a social movement began.
Guess I know what this video is going to be about now.
From the show entirely. Everybody everywhere seems to be in agreement. Apu has got to go.
Really? Is it really everyone everywhere?
Racist.
I somehow doubt that.
Let's find out.
I kind of like the animation style for this. It's cool. Intro. Nice professional seeming intro there.
I'd like to try to not let the fact that I'm a Simpsons fan color my assessment of the evidence. But then again, I also think that me being a Simpsons fan is important to this conversation. And of course, I realize that I can't just accuse people who are offended by Apu of being too sensitive, because that's far too vapid of a stance to take.
I guess,
Mr.
I mean,
Kondabolu says that he's a
probably
Simpsons
pretty
fan
accurate,
as well,
but
and I have no reason to disbelieve him. That being said, I did find it odd that the first thing that stood out to me about this documentary is that the Apu depicted in this film seems very different from the Apu that I know. And as somebody who feels that he has punditry on the subject, let me be the first to say that Apu Nahasapima Pedalon is so much more
that's quite a name
than a thick accent.
I do like to cook. I'm not much of a talker, but I love to listen. And in my leisure time, I like to build furniture and then to have a discussion about where it could be placed in a room.
Okay.
Now, in order to determine if Apu is a harmful stereotype, step one is we have to ask ourselves, what do we know about Apu? Let's make a comprehensive list. He's an immigrant who was born and raised in India. He came to this country looking for a higher education in the field of technology. He lived in America illegally at first, but was able to go through the proper channels and receive his official U.S. citizenship as of episode SO7E23. He's a business owner and a hard worker, sometimes to his own detriment. He's smart.
This particular flag is ridiculously out of date. The library must have purchased it during the brief period in 1912 after New Mexico became a state, but before Arizona did.
So
wow.
Smart, in fact, that he has a doctorate in computer science.
Okay.
Of course, technically does mean he's a doctor. All the women in Springfield want to bang him. He drives a cool car. He enjoys clog dancing, apparently. He has a hot wife, albeit one that was arranged to him. He's expressed an interest in screenwriting. On several occasions, he's been shown serving as a volunteer firefighter. He's a hopeless romantic. He enjoys gardening. He's vegan. He's close personal friends with 2-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee and 18-time Grammy Award-winning visionary musician Sir James Paul McCartney.
Okay.
He's a man of faith.
Of course.
He likes to sing, he likes to bowl, he likes to cook. He's not much of a talker, but he loves to listen. And yes, in his leisure time, he enjoys building furniture and then having a discussion about where it could be placed in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it's all laid out like that, you might think, in stark contrast to the accusation that he's a harmful stereotype, that Apu is actually an outstandingly flattering depiction of an Indian person. He's certainly a more flattering depiction of an Indian than our protagonist, Homer, is a flattering depiction of a Caucasian. A character who, while he does have his own set of redeeming qualities, is most frequently portrayed as being lazy, obese, ignorant, wrathful, alcoholic, obnoxious, insensitive.
Hey, Ganesha, want a peanut?
Please do not offer
Wow.
God a peanut.
Loud, ugly, selfish, homophobic, uneducated, slovenly, gluttonous, irresponsible, oblivious, bald, and he's got a weird penis. And nobody wants to have a weird penis.
Yeah.
Not to mention the flattering and sometimes outwardly critical depictions of countless other demographics on The Simpsons, such as cops, Christians, the developmentally impaired, people with alcoholism, the elderly, American Southerners, the 1%, liberals, conservatives, lawyers, doctors, educators, politicians, celebrities, Scots, Italians, cheese-eating surrender monkeys, people with one giant hand,
Okay.
Millhouse. Now, this isn't a diversionary tactic, I'm not strawmanning, and I'm not trying to imply that the subject at hand is justified because other similar instances make it okay. But all of this is important to note, of course, because it helps us to recontextualize Apu. In the world of Springfield, Apu is one of the most well-adjusted, well-mannered, and level-headed characters. And there's no better evidence of this than the fact that he often plays the straight man whenever he's forced to butt heads with Homer's unique brand of buffoonery.
Is it me, or do your plans always involve some horrible web of lies?
It's you.
Also, he's a generally nice person, and he's usually polite to everybody he interacts with. Hari, in his documentary, refers to this as being servile, but I think that's kind of a cynical way to look at it. I mean, he works in the service industry. Do you want him to be rude to people? Because that's the alternative. And he's not monotonic in his politeness. Apu displays the full range of emotions you'd expect from any human being. We've seen him angry, sad, shocked, embarrassed, forlorn, desperate, exasperated, in love.
Can't put a price on a miracle.
I can't believe you don't shut up. I can't believe you don't shut up.
Now, an Indian guy behind the counter at a corner store is cliché to be sure, but I don't think clichés and harmful stereotypes are interchangeable notions, especially since we shouldn't view working in the service industry as demeaning anyway. Apu seems to like being a small business owner, and arguably a cliché like this is an appropriate thing to depict on a show like The Simpsons because Springfield has always been a satirical microcosm of the American experience. Apu is a character who plays off the prejudices of the audience watching him. He circumvents every expectation you have about the quiet Indian dude who runs your local convenience store. That's the point. He's a bait and switch. But for some reason, some people are looking at him and they're not seeing the switch, they're only seeing the bait. There are a lot of stereotypes in Springfield. Apparently, they even have their own bowling team. But Apu stands out from the rest because his stereotypical traits only exist on his exterior. He simply has more going on under the hood than they do.
Okay.
Arr, me mateys. Arr.
Oh, they begged me to join their team. Begged me.
And yes, he did commit the most egregious sin of lying to us through song.
I hate when people do that.
But even that's something we should be able to forgive. A lot of the upset surrounding Apu does seem to be related to his voice. Apu has a very thick accent. Now, of course, not all people from India have accents. But surely some of them do.
Yeah.
I mean, accents exist. If Apu was stricken from The Simpsons, what kind of message would that send? That people with thick accents don't deserve representation in popular media? Is not all-inclusive representation a core staple of the modern progressive ideology? I dare say, Mr. Kondabolu, I don't think you're being very progressive.
Wow.
Is Apu's accent offensive because it's exaggerated to a comically unrealistic extent? Well, I would say that Apu does have a funny voice. You know who else has a funny voice? Literally every character on the show.
Yeah?
Also, literally every cartoon character ever made. Cartoon characters have had funny voices since they first began to speak. So by what metric are we to discern if Apu sounds like a cartoon character because he's a broad, mean-spirited parody of Indian people, or if he sounds like a cartoon character because, you know, he is one? Is there something implicitly disrespectful about performing a fake accent? Well, let me tell you, folks, I certainly hope not. Because if the answer is yes, then boy, do we have a problem on our hands. Because I can think of a lot of characters with fake accents, and I mean a lot.
Yeah.
We're not just talking cartoons. Actors fake accents all the time.
True.
It's called acting.
Yeah.
Laurie faked an accent on House for 8 years, and he was so good at it that nobody knew. If faking accents is off the table, then there goes Sacha Baron Cohen's career, and probably about half of Johnny Depp's. Now listen, I obviously don't really know anything about the nuances of Hindi-inflected English. Apu sounds like he has an Indian accent to me. But if somebody who actually knew what they were talking about were to tell me that there's not anything realistic about the way that he speaks, I wouldn't have anywhere near the expertise that would be necessary to disagree with them. But Apu is a cartoon character. Why would you expect any level of realism in the way that he speaks when there's nothing real about cartoons? People who speak with Hindi-inflected English might not actually sound like Apu, but I've also never heard anybody who sounds like the Homar, or the Marg, or the Donald Duck, or the Michael Mouse. Let me tell you gotta keep your eye on that Michael Mouse. He's risky with the kids lately. Trying to wrestle with them and stuff.
It's a creepy Mickey.
Oil on him. There's something silly going on with him. Somebody needs to set that guy straight.
That is,
I don't even think Apu's accent is that far of a stretch from Raj's accent on The Big Bang Theory.
From California to the New York Island,
sounds similar to me.
Or Raj's accent on Camp Laszlo.
You failed to earn your nut tying badge 17 times, and you most certainly will not get one today.
In the documentary, Hari expresses that what's so appalling about Apu is that the character took everything his hard-working immigrant parents stood for and replaced it with a shitty accent. Mr. Kondabolu, don't you see? It's not the Simpsons writers who have reduced Apu to his accent. It's you who has done this. By disregarding everything that humanizes the character and gives him depth, choosing instead to only focus on his voice. Which, by the way, is totally adorable!
Good curry, good gunday, let's hurry.
Now, all of this isn't completely lost on Mr. Kondabolu. He mentions in his documentary, albeit all too briefly, that Apu is smart and that the other residents of Springfield are equally ridiculous, if not more so. So what's the problem? Why is everybody picking on this poor immigrant?
You want to pick on immigrants? Then pick on Willie!
Mr. Kondabolu interviews some colleagues and asks them if they've ever been bullied about their race, and if they've ever been compared to Apu. Friends teasing each other about their race isn't the worst thing as long as everybody's having a good time, but bullying is obviously very not okay. I've never been secretive about the fact that I really like jokes about race, but at the same time, as an American, the last thing I want is for anyone to feel unwelcome in my country. Now, this is something I absolutely need to express. If you've been bullied, I'm genuinely sorry that that happened to you. I'm not being facetious. And this empathy comes from a place of experience. I was bullied mercilessly as a kid. I'm sure many of you watching this video have experiences with bullying. As much as we wish it wasn't true, bullying is a part of childhood. Sometimes it's a part of adulthood. It's a lousy, ugly thing, but for some inexplicable reason, bullying has been ingrained into our socio-biological evolution. We can have a contingency plan for it, but it's not going away. It's in our bones. That being said, if a bully bullies you and compares you to a cartoon character, you gotta blame the bully. You can't blame the cartoon.
Yeah.
If I was a big fat guy, a stretch of the imagination. and I was walking around wearing a big goofy red shirt, and some bully came along and compared me to the Kool-Aid Man. Is the Kool-Aid Man to blame? If Apu had never existed, you couldn't reasonably expect bullying to be eradicated. Never underestimate a bully's ability to find material to work with.
I hate kids with funny accents.
Honestly, I think the
Who was that from? I remember that.
Apu is not Apu himself. It's that sometimes there
Dexter's
are people
Lab,
who are
I think?
jerks sometimes.
Hey, I get
He's got a
called
funny
Kumar
accent.
all the time because of you. I just looked at him and was like, it's better than Apu.
Yeah, right.
Can bullies and bigots weaponize Apu as a way to demean Indian people? Well, yeah, sure. But they can also do it with literally anything. Personally, I'd be a lot more insulted by being called Kumar than I would be by being called Apu.
Yeah.
Apu is a vegan, firefighting, sexual Casanova who has a cool car, a doctorate in computer science, and is
And Kumar's
friends
a
with Paul
stoner.
McCartney. Kumar likes smoking weed
Yeah.
and eating hamburgers. What's so bad about being called Apu anyway? My homeboy Apu was the first Indian brother on American television to bang white bitches. Give the man some props, son. Quote me on that. You can laugh at him all you want, but he was still getting roadhead from Miss Hoover. Apu gets the last laugh. He was laughing all the way home that night. Look, I really don't want to seem like I'm being insensitive to the fact that these poor kids got picked on, especially since I've been there so many times myself. But ultimately, aren't we supposed to not let the behavior of jerks dictate what responsible people like me should or shouldn't be allowed to enjoy responsibly? If your answer to that question is no, then what we're really talking about, as melodramatic as it sounds, is censorship.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, then check the definition. I also don't know if I buy the idea that a character like Apu is capable of making people racist. Is this possible? Well, I'm a white guy, last time I checked anyway, and I grew up watching The Simpsons every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So when you think about it, I'm basically the perfect test subject for the harmful effects that prolonged Apu exposure can have on a developing impressionable mind. So, how come I'm not racist? After all, I did spend my entire childhood being bombarded by deadly Apu radiation. I mean, for crying out loud, people, do I look like a dang racist to you? Don't answer that! I don't deny that there are people in this world who ridicule others, but they
I don't know what to
sure
make
did
of
learn
his
that
look.
behavior from the Simpsons family, who has only ever treated Apu with the utmost
Doesn't
dignity.
say racist
Apu's
to me, though.
dynamic in Springfield, his relationship to everyone else, the way he views them and the way they view him. It's all so positive and wholesome. He's like a member of the family. They're all in love. Apu helps us with our problems. Apu teaches us good morals. Apu goes on our adventures with us. We help Apu with his problems because we care about him. He's just another person who lives here. He's just one of the guys. He's one of Homer's friends. None of the characters view each other in a detrimental way. He's a vital part of their community. He's just another spicy flavor in the melting pot. One little Apu does not a racist make. You wouldn't accuse this sweet, precious face of turning people racist, would you? Now look, I can't stand here and tell you that The Simpsons has never used Apu as a vehicle to poke fun at Indian culture. Because yes, they've done that. But anything that can be said about The Simpsons making fun of Indian culture could be said tenfold about The Simpsons making fun of white American culture. Because making fun of culture is just what comedy does.
Well, Homer, Christian life isn't all praying and sacrifice. Hey, dig this.
God said to Noah,
There's gonna be a floody, floody.
It's what comedy has always done. It's practically the definition of comedy. Comedy is a mirror of exaggeration that we hold up to ourselves, our society, and the world that we live in. You can't make the folly of believing that Indian culture should be sanctimoniously exempt from satire. That's just not reasonable. Mr. Kondabolu, you're a comedian. I'd like to think you'd agree with me on this. But I guess you don't. Boy, you must be really funny. By the way, I will be expecting you to cease and desist any and all jokes about America, which I suspect will be difficult for you considering you did make fun of America several times throughout your documentary, But I'm sure you'll adapt. I mean, we all have to be more sensitive. After all, you don't want to be a guy who makes fun of a culture while simultaneously demanding that people stop making fun of your culture. That's not a good look. You can't draw lines between who it's okay to make fun of and who it isn't okay to make fun of, because at that point, we're not really treating people like equals anymore. We're treating some people like horrible monsters who deserve it, and other people like fragile infants who can't handle it. We're talking about a show that actually has a character named Cletus the Slack-Jawed Yokel. Anybody have any commentary on this? Any documentaries anybody want to make? Or is the crisis still the brown guy with the doctorate in computer science who enjoys building furniture and then having a discussion about where it could be placed in a room? Now, why is it that foreigners are funny? What is this phenomenon? Can it be explained? Is it because racist white folk like me find humor in ridiculing those who are different from us? Well, that's certainly the sensationalist perspective, but it's also an incredibly specious answer. Apu is what you would call a fish out of water. He's a man who lives in an environment where everybody else's culture is obscenely different from his own. This makes him appear eccentric. To us, of course. It's all relative. He wouldn't appear eccentric if he was in India. And because we're dealing with comedy, and comedy is exaggeration, his eccentricities are exaggerated. Where Mr. Kondabolu and I diverge in opinion is just how malicious everything that I just described actually is. There's nothing inherently wrong with being eccentric. Being eccentric doesn't make you despicable or unintelligent or inferior. A lot of the time, eccentric people can be very likable. Eccentric is basically the ideal word you could use to describe Apu, and I think his eccentricities are what endear him to audiences. Apu is eccentric, and so he is endearing. And the other residents of Springfield don't care that Apu is eccentric. They view him as an equal anyway. Most of the time, they don't even notice that he's different.
It may astonish you to learn that I am an immigrant.
I don't believe it.
Wow.
There's a great movie from the 80s called Coming to America, starring Eddie Murphy, that does an excellent job of delineating that finding humor in culture shock isn't always intrinsically condescending. If Apu was really so terrible, I posit that people probably would have noticed right away. The Simpsons has always been relatively left-leaning, and 1989 wasn't that long ago. They even used Apu himself as a means to speak critically on America's views on immigration, which some people consider to be xenophobic. And they did it in 1996, 20 years before Trump. Are we watching the same show? If you don't like The Simpsons, everybody should watch the season 7 episode, Much Apu About Nothing. That's your homework. This episode is literally far more relevant now than it ever was when it came out over 20 years ago. And of course, it's yet another thing that the Problem with Apu documentary conveniently omitted. The moral, summarized by Lisa, is that we can't scrutinize immigrants too severely, because we all immigrated here. You know, except for Native Americans.
Yeah, Native Americans like us.
No, I mean American Indians.
Like me.
No, I mean...
This episode is about the plight of an immigrant. And that plight is what it's like to have to face xenophobia when you're in a foreign land. And what it's like to be forced to leave a country that you love, and a country that you call home, and a country where your life and your friends are. How can you think Apu is a one-dimensional stereotype when there's no better way of showing the humanity of an immigrant than that?
Oh, I wish I could have stayed just one more year or two. There was so much I wanted to see and to do and to have done to me.
This isn't just a funny episode with a significant political message, but it's also very poignant. Apu is being deported. It's sad, and we empathize. Apu feels as if he's betrayed his cultural identity. It's sad, and we empathize. The fact that we, a primarily white audience, are capable of viewing Apu as an empathetic figure means that the writers did their job in making him a human being. If he was nothing more than a funny talking oaf, we wouldn't care about him in that way, and this episode wouldn't have worked. This entire plot hinges on the audience's compassion for him. You know, I must confess, I do find it a little hypocritical that none of these self-righteous internet groups have gone after Bart, a character so malignant, so reprehensible, so morally bankrupt that he at one point actually allowed his dog to eat Milhouse's goldfish, and then he lied to him and told him he never had a goldfish. But why did he have the bowl, Bart? Why did he have the mole?
I,
Lastly, and perhaps the most sensitive angle to broach,
Lastly?
Apu
There's
has
still
been
like half a video
criticized
left.
for being an Indian man who has been and continues to be played by a white man named Hank Azaria. Here's the thing about voice acting. Voice acting is the single only subset of the acting vocation wherein a person's physical appearance and personal identity has no bearing on their ability to perform a role. If you were to make a biopic film about the life of Abraham Lincoln, you wouldn't just be restricted to finding an actor of a certain ethnicity, but also height, build, facial structure, general age, etc., etc. If you made an animated movie about Lincoln, you wouldn't be hampered by any of this. So by allowing people to provide voices for characters that don't coincide with their real-world identity, you create more career opportunities for literally everybody. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that a good thing? After all, I don't recall hearing anybody cry foul when this katana-wielding samurai warrior from feudal Japan was played by a black guy, or when this ancient Incan alchemist from 13th century Peru was played by a black woman, or when this boy was played by a girl, or when these girls were played by boys. The field of voice acting is a wide, wide swath of hundreds of actresses and actors playing countless characters that don't coincide with their ethnicity or gender in real life. Are we seriously tasked with having to recast all of them? So, I'm sorry, but if it's okay for a black guy to play a Japanese guy and do a fake Japanese voice and everything, then you gotta let a white guy play an Indian guy, or else we find ourselves culpable of a double standard. And it is my understanding that those are bad. I mean, do you guys realize how many unique combinations are actually possible? What if an Australian character were to be played by a Hispanic person? Is this okay? Is this allowed? What's the ruling? Who gets to make the ruling? Should it be Hispanics or should it be Australians? Or, conversely, now that this conversation has led us to the point where we're talking about Rocco's modern life, perhaps we should stop, take a step back, think about what we're doing, and realize
Hispanic,
that we're probably thinking about this a little too much.
Probably.
Voice actor, have you ever played a character of a different race? Well, if you've been doing it for very long, chances are you probably have. I've done it a bunch of times, and I'm not even a professional voice actor. Mr. Kondabolu, during your film, you went out and you spoke to people on the street and revealed to them that Apu's voice actor is a white guy so that you could document their surprise. They were surprised that Apu was played by a white guy. They would have had no way of discerning it themselves if you hadn't have told them. Doesn't that speak volumes about the inconsequentiality of a voice actor's race?
It kinda does.
I come from Italian people. I'm not purebred, of course. I got some mud in there as well. But what would be the Italian equivalency of Apu? I guess it's gotta be everybody's favorite Mushroom Kingdom plumber. Goofy, exaggerated voice? Yeah. Fake accent? Yeah. Played by a white guy of incorrect ethnicity? Yeah. Well, it all sounds pretty incriminating on paper. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a paisano who actually cares. We're all too busy enjoying a delicious plate of spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah.
My favorite part of the problem with Apu is when they express pietistic outrage about the Italian chef.
Stereotype? Who's a stereotype? That's a spicy accusation.
You pipe it down.
I don't think there's an Italian person on Earth who actually gives a fart, but I guess it's probably just because we couldn't hear the joke. You know, on account of we all have Grandma Rosina's meatballs stuck in our ears. Mamma mia, that's a spicy. Well, if you'll excuse, I gotta go save the Princess Peach. Woohoo!
Okay.
Now that's a sensitivity. Right, Giuseppe? Giuseppe is such a happy monkey.
Exaggerated accents are deemed insensitive and are to go the way of the buffalo, then we have to stop and carefully consider what imposing that status quo will mean and what we stand to lose.
I gave my mommy a cake, she turned into a big bear, my Algin tried to dare in. If that's not pure mess, I don't know what is. We can't understand her.
You might not necessarily care about the ultimate fate of Apu, but I'm guessing a lot of you care about Mario. That's right, I'm resorting to dirty tactics. I grew up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, a city with a powerfully Italian community, and I've never heard anyone who talks like Mario. I've never heard an Italian person say Mamma Mia. Not even the old lady who taught me Italian sounded like Mario, and figlio di puttana, she was a real Gecchiadini if you know what I mean. And Charles Martinet isn't Italian, he's French, the sworn enemy of Italians everywhere. When Mario falls asleep in Mario 64, he dreams about pasta.
Wow.
Italian people don't dream about pasta.
I mean, some of them might.
One time. If dreaming about pasta sounds
Pasta's pretty
innocuous
good.
to you, then ask yourself, what would Mario be dreaming about if he wasn't Italian?
Spaghetti, ravioli, fried rice, wonton soup, grape
Oh.
menthol cigarettes.
Wow. Wow.
I don't know, maybe a bagel and lox? I haven't thought about it yet. I'll have to see how I feel. Where would I even get a good bagel? The Mushroom Kingdom.
God.
Oy, Gavalt, who knows? There's a character on a 30-year-old sitcom
Jewish Mario.
Who doesn't represent you. Well, not that it's a contest or anything, but the single most recognizable Italian face on this planet sure doesn't represent me. And he's not even played by an Italian guy. When you clicked on this video, you might have thought I was just some dumbass cracker who was putting his foot in his mouth about an issue that he was too privileged to possibly be able to understand. Well, not exactly.
Yeah, I didn't even know what the issue
world's most
was.
popular video game character is a misrepresentation of the biggest part of my ethnic lineage. Now, if your first impulse is to think that this sounds absurd, melodramatic, and sensationalist, then I'd say you have a pretty good understanding of how I felt when I first heard about the problem with Apu. But I'm not just playing devil's advocate when I say that there's a legitimate argument to be made that Mario exhibits an understanding of Italian people that's superficial, cartoonish, and outdated.
Have a little piece of spaghetti on your overalls. You, Luigi, and you have a little bit of spaghetti sauce on your shirt. As you
Gotta love the Super
and
Show.
There's nothing I can ever do about it.
Going way back.
Honestly, there's nothing I'd ever want to do about it. Because I love Mario. I'm glad Mario's Italian, because it makes me happy to know that there's an Italian character out there that people really care about and enjoy. Even if he's goofy. Even if he has a funny accent, even if he has a silly mustache, and a bulbous nose, and a pot belly. Does any of this sound familiar? And yes, even though he's not played by an Italian guy. You see, whenever I hear somebody imitate an Italian person, I remember an old adage that I learned as a child. Perhaps you've heard it as well. And I'm capable and willing to laugh at the goofiness of my culture and how it probably appears to outsiders who aren't familiar with it. Do you want to know why, even with the greasy, boiling hot, marinara-laced blood of 1,000 generations of Guido ancestors coursing violently through my veins, this still doesn't bother me? Because Mario isn't real. Nobody thinks this is real.
Yeah.
None of this is real. It's all fake. Who is racist? The religious, romantic, bowling, gardening, singing, firefighting, clog dancing, furniture building, vegan doctor who came to America looking for a higher education, built a successful business to pay off his student loans, and started seducing our women? That guy? And he's not just a generous lover. Apu knows how to provide for a lady. He's a gentlemanly son of a bitch. He'll roll up to your house and pick you up in a damn nice car. Homer ain't got no damn nice car. Apu don't care if you laugh at his accent. Apu is fucking your wife.
Wow.
And she thinks he's so much better than you. Oh,
okay.
He's one of the best she's ever had, honey. Apu has stamina and is fortuitously endowed. How do you feel about Apu now? How do you feel about this swarthy, mysterious, olive-skinned stranger from the exotic East?
Oh, God.
How do you feel about his burly stomach, his thick, sinewy arms, and his powerful weather?
This took a weird turn.
I might have gone too far here. I realize that now.
Possibly.
Alright, I want to change gears. I disagree with all the things this Hari Kondabolu guy says. I've made that clear. But I don't want this video to seem like I'm trying to pick a fight with him. Even though I have teased him a couple times. In all seriousness, He put his opinion out there, and he gets my respect for that. Because putting your opinion out there can be a scary thing to do. Especially in this situation, because he probably knew that this was an opinion that people weren't going to want to hear. There are a lot of fans of The Simpsons out there, there are a lot of fans of Apu, and people generally don't like being told it's wrong to enjoy something they enjoy. Thinking about Apu has helped me to realize the true power of perception. Me and Mr. Kondabolu are looking at the same character, and yet we're seeing two very different things. It's kind of emblematic of the human condition as a whole, because diverging perceptions is the true source of all conflicts that humans have. If we all had the same perception, we wouldn't be human. We'd be ants. And I don't want to be ants.
Who
Ants
does?
never have any fun. There are a lot of people of Indian descent who live in this country, and I have to assume that there are probably plenty of people of Indian descent who subscribe to this YouTube channel. If your family is from India, then the last thing I want is to ever give you the impression that I'm trying to disrespect you. Or, Ganesh forbid, that I think you don't belong here, because of course you belong here. Everybody belongs here, hence the fondue pot analogy. It might sound corny, but Apu kind of embodies the spirit of the American dream. His life is better for having moved to Springfield, and Springfield is better for having him, even if he sells old food. I ultimately believe that this is America, and people have the right to be offended by whatever they want to be offended by. Remember, the best possible version of our society isn't one where everybody believes the same thing and agrees on everything, but rather one where people with conflicting beliefs can coexist peaceably.
I learned long ago, Lisa, to tolerate others rather than forcing my beliefs on them. You know, you can influence people without badgering them always. It's like Paul's song, live and let live.
And like I said earlier, it's a weak stance to just accuse people
Paul
of
knows
being
what
too
he's talking
sensitive.
about.
That's a vacuous, insubstantial argument that people have been levying against the social justice movement since the beginning. However, Mr. Kondabolu, I did think it was pretty lame that you basically only interviewed people who agreed with you. You offered no room for a dissenting viewpoint. How come you didn't interview any Simpsons fans who like Apu? I suspect it's because their answers wouldn't have fit within your narrative. That narrative being, if people like Apu, it is because they are racist. What other explanation could there possibly be? Well, I can think of a few, and I think a lot of Simpsons fans would agree. Perhaps you should have asked them. Instead of imposing a radically assumptive, and quite frankly, judgmental, ad hominem against their collective morality. Refusing to acknowledge the alternative outlook gives the impression you have something to hide. A bunch of talking heads who all believe the same thing might seem compelling on the surface, but when you think about it, if I wanted to, I could probably find at least 50 people to interview about how the world is flat. Also, you folks have to stop putting Hank Azaria's entire career on blast. It's shameful to think it's justified to put this poor guy up on the cross for doing a funny accent when every voice actor in the industry does funny accents, because that's their job.
Yeah.
White lamprey of Santa Fe. So ornery and sad, real.
You have a
great movie.
color voiced by white actors. No. Yes.
And if you're a voice actor, I think you should feel somewhat obligated to stand in solidarity with this guy, lest somebody comes for your funny accent next.
By the glorious red hair of Patty O'Malley, what did we do to you?
All right, more common ground. Another grievance aired against Apu is that he served as the sole representation of the Indian ethnicity on American television for so long. Now here's something we can all wrap our heads around. Mr. Kondabolu, you want more Indian characters in pop culture? I think you deserve that. I think all Indian people deserve that. I mean, there are 1.5 billion of you. However, the fact that Apu has been the only Indian on TV doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on Apu himself, and it's certainly not a problem that dismantling Apu is going to ameliorate. More Indian actresses and actors? Great. More Indian characters? Great. More diversity in the way those characters are portrayed? Also great. But remember, diversity isn't just characters who are positive and well assimilated. In fiction, just like in real life, there are people of foreign descent who have assimilated to life in America seamlessly. But there are also foreigners who wear their culture a little more on their sleeve. It defines them more. It's more of a part of who they are. And it's this kind of person that Apu is a clear exaggeration of. Going from exclusively one to exclusively the other isn't diversity. Diversity is both. After all, isn't it considered intolerant to demand that foreigners conceal their cultural heritage?
Hey, say something again.
Oh, you're just noticing the way I'm talking to you now. You see, it turns out I am an American citizen after all. Apparently, I just
plumb forgot about it. Ha ha ha.
All right, I've said a lot of controversial garbage today. I
Have
expect
you?
there will be those of you who will try to invalidate my thoughts under the dismissive umbrella of
All seems
splaining,
pretty reasonable
because
to me.
Of course, I am the most evil kind of person that can possibly exist.
Oh, okay.
A straight white man.
Yes. Can't have that. Oh, wow. Okay.
Sorry. Usually we try to keep these things hidden. And even though I subscribe to the belief that
That's what the hat's for.
marginalizing anybody's opinion based on the color of their skin is, in effect, just another form of racism, there is one thing you and I can agree on, Mr. Kondabolu. I don't know what it's like to be an Indian living in America. And I never can. It's simply a perspective that I lack. However, if there's one area where I don't lack perspective, it's how white America perceives Apu. Why is that important? Well, if you hate Apu, I can't tell you that you're wrong. I can't say your emotions are incorrect. That would be ridiculous. I can't even say that your reasons for your emotions are incorrect. But I do believe that you've grossly misinterpreted how other people view him. Specifically, you've misinterpreted Apu's appeal. Why he became popular. Why people like him. Is it because we're all just racist and we think he's a clown? You want to know what I see when I look at Apu? I see a man who speaks to the fish out of water in all of us. I see a man who's unabashed of his culture and enjoys sharing it openly with the people around him. I see a man who's better than me. He's more hardworking, more educated, more accomplished, and he contributes more to society. If he was a real person, I would have no choice but to respect him. Heck, I wish I was Apu. He's life. I see a man who serves as a reminder to all Americans that people with thick accents are usually far more multifaceted and intelligent than you might initially judge them to be when you first hear them speak. I see a man who's accepted and cherished by his peers and his community, regardless of the fact that he's so wildly different from them. And I see a man who's perhaps a little more complicated than the social justice movement seems to think he is. Servile, devious, and goofy. Yeah, no shit he's goofy. He's a cartoon character. They're supposed to be goofy. Because the real world is goofy. Indians are goofy, Americans are goofy, and the cartoon characters exist to show us how damn goofy we are. Lest we forget and accidentally take ourselves too seriously.
Okay.
Here's the bottom line. When the Simpsons writers created a clerk to man the cash register at the Quickie Mart, there's no way they could have anticipated that Apu would be the sole depiction of the Indian ethnicity on American television for so long.
If I was a sculptor, ha. But then again...
In the beginning, he was little more than a funny accent, but he also didn't experience a whole lot of spotlight. As the seasons rolled on and more episodes featured him predominantly, they expanded on him. They added layers and dimensions. They made him a big teddy bear who enjoys building furniture and having a discussion about where it can be placed in a room.
My gift is my song, yeah. And this one's from Apu.
They made him a person. Isn't that what we want from our depictions of people of color? There's an episode where Apu cheats on Manjula, and stricken with loneliness and regret
Apparently that's happening a lot.
to her, he attempts to take his own life. That's a person there. That's a human being if I ever saw one. Only a human is capable of that kind of emotional complexity. To say that Apu is a stereotype is to fundamentally disregard the individual that the character has done more than is necessary to demonstrate that he is. Apu is a perfectly cromulent character. I mean, for crying out loud, this guy was the fifth Beatle.
Sure you were, Apu.
I'll tell you one thing, you sure didn't hear Marge complaining when she kissed him.
Woohoo!
He might not be Italian, but I wish he was, because I'd accept him with open arms. And if finding a foreign accent endearing makes me racist, then I'm so damn sorry. Oh, the guilt. Somebody, please, relieve this burden in my heart. Absolve me, absolve my sins, for I am but a wretch. Hank Azaria recently said that he wouldn't be opposed to relinquishing the role to somebody else if he was asked to. I'm sure you guys can imagine how I would react to that. You know how I feel about cartoon characters and their voices. If a character like Apu really can't exist in the 21st century, then I guess people like me will just have to consider ourselves lucky that we got to enjoy him for as long as we did. You know, there are a lot of problems in this world, but no matter which way I slice it, I just don't think Apu's one of them. This might be presumptuous, but I suspect the reason people have suddenly become so outraged by Apu is because they think that for the past 30 years, we've all been laughing at him. But we haven't. We've been laughing with him. And if Apu can make people laugh, then even if it sounds schmaltzy, then that means Apu makes people happy. Apu makes me happy.
Wow.
And I may or may not have a crush on him.
Okay. I thought we said we
were
were straight earlier.
It is because they are racist. What other explanation could there possibly be? I can never truly know how Indian people see him. But don't tell me that people only like Apu because they're racist. Because I love Apu, and I know that that's not why. And think, people, if Apu is removed from The Simpsons, then who will sell us our issues of Gigantic Asses magazine?
That's important.
That's a question I don't want to have to ask.
Are you talking about race stuff on the internet?
Maybe.
Well, don't worry about it. I mean, hey, it's not like you needed your career or anything.
Wow.
Goofball, do you mind? Can't you see I'm busy telling ethnic minorities how to feel?
You know, this is a perfect opportunity for one of my hilarious, highly racist jokes.
Oh.
All right, stop me if you've heard this one. 3 black guys walk into an abortion clinic.
Yeah, no
Oh,
thanks,
wow.
Goofball.
The first black guy says, I want my wife to get an abortion because I'm too lazy to raise a child.
Thank you, Goofball. That's enough.
The second black guy says, I want my wife to get an abortion because I'm too drunk to raise a child.
I said no, Goofball!
And the third black
What's
guy
the punchline?
says, abortion clinic? I thought this was a dang Popeye's chicken!
God.
Why, you little... I'll teach you to undermine my entire argument with edgelord humor.
Wow.
Gee, this was my brain dump of the week, and I hope you hated it.
Oh, you just do this every week? Wow. Seems like this would be kind of... I mean, it seems very well produced, just in terms of everything.
Quidjaboian fishbulb.
I don't know how difficult the animation is for it, but it just feels like it would be
Let me tell you,
a lot of work.
Typical Indians, always building furniture and then wanting to have a discussion about where it could be placed in a room.
Oh.
Ow!
Okay. No, that was fun. That was, I mean, I don't know if that needed to be that long. I mean, I guess, are they all this long? This is a regular thing he does, then maybe that's just the length that they are. But, yeah, it was good. I mean, I don't know. As said, I haven't watched The Simpsons in forever, but I remember liking Apu. I thought he was a cool guy. Cool character. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we're making whole documentaries about how racist he is these days. That is just insane. And no. Just no. Just no. But, yeah, I don't know. Just a 45-minute video all about this is kind of interesting thing. But yeah, it was good. It was entertaining. Even given the length, it was pretty fun. So there we go. Hope you liked the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.